The air in the country club banquet hall was thick with chatter and the clinking of glasses. I stood beside my father, his hand warm on my shoulder, as he beamed at the crowd gathered for his retirement. Then my mother, Carol, tapped her champagne flute. The room fell quiet. Her smile was sharp. "To my wonderful husband," she began, her voice dripping with false sweetness. She listed his achievements, then her eyes landed on me. "And look at everyone here. Doctors, lawyers, business owners. Everyone has accomplished something worth celebrating." She paused, letting the silence grow heavy. "Well, almost everyone. Except Mary, of course." A wave of awkward chuckles rippled through the room. I froze, my cheeks burning. I looked at my husband, Evan. He simply studied his shoes, refusing to meet my gaze. The humiliation was a physical weight. And then, the grand double doors at the back of the hall swung open. Two serious men in dark suits and earpieces entered, scanning the room. A collective gasp went up. And right behind them, the President of the United States stepped inside. His eyes swept the stunned crowd, then settled directly on me. You could have heard a pin drop. The President, flanked by his security detail, moved through the parted crowd with an easy confidence. He walked right past my speechless mother and my gaping father. He stopped in front of me, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "Mary," he said, his voice warm and familiar. He took my hand in both of his. "It's so good to see you." My mother's face went from triumphant to a ghostly white. The whispers started instantly, a frantic buzz of "How does she know him?" and "What is happening?" The President leaned in slightly. "I'm sorry to interrupt your family event, but I was hoping we could catch up privately for a moment." Before I could answer, my mother hissed from behind me, "Mary, what have you gotten yourself into?" Her voice was a venomous whisper. I ignored her, my heart hammering against my ribs. I gave the President a small, stunned nod. The cliffhanger hung in the air as I followed him out of the silent, staring room, leaving my entire family in shock. We stepped into a quiet, wood-paneled anteroom, the door closing on the stunned silence of the banquet hall. The President turned to me, his expression earnest. "Mary, I heard through the grapevine you'd be here tonight. I wanted to thank you in person." I was still reeling. "Thank me, sir?" "The Community Futures Program," he said. "Your design work on that initiative, 8 years ago? It's become the model for 6 states. It's creating real opportunities. You never got the credit you deserved for that." I was speechless. My family had dismissed that job as a hobby. My mother had called it a distraction. He saw the look on my face. "I'm serious. I'm assembling an advisory council for national community development, and I want you on it. Your voice, your practical experience, it's exactly what we need." For the first time in years, I felt seen. Valued. The feeling was intoxicating. But a cold thought followed the warmth. My mother would never let this stand. She would find a way to make it about my perfect older brother, to diminish this. A quiet, fierce resolve settled in my chest. Not this time. Walking back into the banquet hall felt like stepping onto a stage. Every eye was glued to me. The moment the door shut behind me, my mother was at my side, her fingers digging into my arm. "What was that about?" she demanded, her voice loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "What did you do?" My father tried to interject. "Carol, please, not now." "She must be exaggerating some old project," Carol insisted, glaring at me. "Trying to make a scene." Evan shuffled over, his face a mask of embarrassment. "Mary, what's going on? This is very unusual." I looked at their anxious, suspicious faces and felt a strange calm. I didn't argue. I didn't try to convince them. I simply said, "He offered me a role. An advisory position with his administration." Carol scoffed, but before she could speak, Evan muttered under his breath, "You shouldn't take something like that too seriously, Mary. It's probably just for show." In that moment, the final veil lifted. My real problem wasn't just my mother's cruelty. It was the man who was supposed to be my partner, always ready to hold me back. The car ride home was icy. The party had ended soon after, the atmosphere irreparably broken. At home, Evan finally unleashed his true feelings. "Your place is here, supporting my career," he lectured, pacing the living room. "Not chasing some pipe dream in Washington. Do you know how this makes me look?" I stood quietly, watching him. All the years of his subtle put-downs, his lack of support, came rushing back. "Have you ever once," I asked, my voice dangerously quiet, "supported anything I wanted? Truly supported me?" He stopped pacing and looked at me, his expression cold and utterly honest. "Why would I? You weren't going to succeed anyway, Mary. Let's be realistic." The words didn't just hurt, they shattered the last illusion of our marriage. They were a confirmation of everything I had feared. The foundation of my life cracked open. That night, as he slept, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The decision was made not with drama, but with a chilling, strategic clarity. I was leaving. The next morning, I began my quiet exit. I called the number the president's aide had given me and formally accepted the advisory role. Then, I started planning. I opened a separate bank account, diverting a small portion of my freelance earnings. I contacted an old college friend about renting her furnished guesthouse. I documented everything: finances, Evan's belittling comments in my journal, the details of the new job. I didn't tell Evan or my mother a thing. I simply started disappearing, piece by piece, into the outline of my new life. I attended my first meetings via video call, the thrill of being taken seriously fueling my resolve. I was careful, methodical, leaving no trace. But I was also human. One afternoon, I came home to find Evan standing in the kitchen, his face dark. He was holding my tote bag. And in his hand was the temporary government visitor badge I had carelessly left inside. The game was up. "What is this?" Evan demanded, waving the plastic badge. "Going behind my back? You're actually taking this ridiculous job? You're trying to embarrass me." His voice rose with each accusation. I remained perfectly calm, the stillness inside me a stark contrast to his fury. "I am taking the job, Evan. It's my decision." He sneered. "I'll tell your family you've become unstable. That this power trip has gone to your head. They'll believe me." He had always used my family as a weapon. But the weapon was now blunt. "I'm done," I said, my voice even. "I'm done explaining myself. I'm done asking for permission." I reached into my bag and pulled out a sealed white envelope. I held it out to him. He stared at it, confused, then snatched it from my hand. He tore it open, his eyes scanning the top line. His face went slack with shock. He was holding the initial petition for our divorce. The confrontation was over before it had even truly begun. The fallout was immediate. My mother, Carol, called an emergency family intervention at her house 2 days later. I walked into her pristine living room to find my father, my brother, and Evan already there, their faces grim. Carol launched in immediately. "You are destroying this family's image, Mary. This fantasy of working in politics? You will drop it immediately. You will apologize to Evan and beg him to take you back." I stood in the center of the room, a rock in a stormy sea. "No, I won't," I said calmly. My brother groaned. "Always so difficult, Mary." That was it. I opened my purse and took out my phone. "Evan has spent our entire marriage telling me I wouldn't succeed," I said, and I began to read aloud from my journal. His exact words, his dismissals, his coldness. The room was silent except for my steady voice. When I finished, my father looked heartbroken. My brother looked away, ashamed. But Carol's face was a mask of pure fury. The room erupted into overlapping shouts and arguments. And then, Carol said the words that crossed a permanent line. "You need to face the truth, Mary. You were never meant to be someone important. Her words hung in the air, toxic and final. But instead of crushing me, they set me free. For the first time in my life, I did not shrink. I looked my mother directly in the eye, my voice clear and cutting through the chaos. Your cruelty ends today. Right here. My father stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. That's enough, Carol, he said, his voice trembling with an anger I'd never heard. You will not speak to our daughter that way ever again. The room went utterly silent, stunned by his defiance. I looked at each of their shocked faces, my mother's rage, my brother's confusion, my father's pained support. I stood up, pulling my shoulders back. You'll all see what I'm capable of, I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. Soon. As if on cue, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and glanced at the screen. My breath caught. It was an unexpected name. The president's chief of staff was calling. I walked out of my mother's house and into the cool evening air, answering the phone as I went. Mary, the chief of staff's voice was brisk but friendly. The president was impressed with your initial notes. We're launching a new national initiative, the American Communities Revitalization Project. We want you to spearhead it. My mind raced. This was no longer an advisory role, this was a leadership position. A huge promotion. It meant a national platform, public speeches, and being in the spotlight, the very thing my family always claimed I'd never survive. The fear was a cold trickle, but it was instantly washed away by a wave of determination. This was the opportunity of a lifetime, the very validation they had tried to deny me. I'm honored, I said, my voice steady. I accept. I ended the call and leaned against my car, my heart pounding. I knew this would be the final provocation. The backlash would be severe, but for the first time I was ready for it. I was no longer defending, I was advancing. The news of my appointment broke quietly but quickly. Within a week, a local newspaper ran a feature, "Local Woman Tapped for White House Initiative." Then a national political blog picked up the story. My inbox flooded with messages from old classmates and former colleagues, their words filled with genuine encouragement and pride. The world outside my family was celebrating me. Inside the family, the atmosphere grew tense and uncomfortable. My brother left a terse, congratulatory voicemail that sounded like it pained him. My father called, his voice thick with emotion, telling me how proud he was. But my mother? Carol called, her tone a poor imitation of support. We saw the article, dear. It's lovely that they're giving you a chance. I stayed polite but detached, offering no personal details. I was building a new life, and she was no longer a central part of it. Then, my phone lit up with a text from Evan. The message was simple, but it sent a chill down my spine. We need to talk. It's urgent. I agreed to meet Evan at a neutral coffee shop. He was already there, looking disheveled and anxious. He didn't even wait for me to sit down. I was laid off, he blurted out, his eyes wide with panic. The whole department was downsized. I sipped my coffee, saying nothing. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. Mary, you have connections now. You can talk to someone. Get me an interview. If you do this, we can postpone the divorce. We can work on things. I was stunned by his audacity. After everything, he saw my success not as an achievement, but as a tool for his own benefit. He still viewed me as a supporting character in his story. No, Evan, I said, my voice firm. I won't do that. His face crumpled, then hardened. The desperation in his eyes was replaced by a flicker of malice. If you don't help me, he hissed, leaning so close I could smell his stale coffee breath, I'll go to the press. I'll tell them you were emotionally abusive. That this powerful new job changed you. The threat hung in the air, ugly and real. A year ago, his threat would have terrified me. It would have sent me into a spiral of self-doubt and fear. But now, I felt a strange, powerful calm. I didn't panic. I didn't beg. I simply went to work. I scheduled a meeting with the HR and legal team at my new office. I laid out the situation calmly and factually. I provided them with copies of my journal entries, the divorce filing, and a timeline of events. I showed them the text message demanding we talk. Everything I did was lawful, clean, and professional. I had learned to fight with integrity, not with emotion. My lawyers assured me we were prepared for any false allegations. We began drafting preemptive statements, protecting my reputation and the integrity of the project I was leading. I was building a fortress of truth. Just as we were finalizing the strategy, my personal phone buzzed. It was an email from a political journalist from a major news network. The subject line read, "Request for comment." Evan had already spoken to them. I agreed to meet the journalist, a sharp, perceptive woman named Anya. I expected an attack, a barrage of leading questions based on Evan's lies. But Anya surprised me. "Mrs. Thorne," she began, "I've spoken with your ex-husband. His story is inconsistent. He claims emotional abuse, but his examples are vague. He seems more focused on his own unemployment than on any specific hurt." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "He mentioned you abandoned him after he lost his job, but our records show you filed for divorce 3 weeks before his company announced layoffs." She had done her homework. "I'm giving you the chance to share your side of the story." Calmly. Factually. This was the twist I hadn't dared hope for. Evan's own bitterness and poor planning had undermined his credibility. I took a deep breath, looking at the recording device she placed on the table between us. This was my chance to control the narrative. "Thank you," I said. "I'd like that." I agreed to the interview, and we began. The segment was scheduled to air that Sunday night. The interview aired. I watched myself on screen, calm and composed. I didn't cry or raise my voice. I simply stated the facts. My years of being undervalued, the lack of support, my decision to pursue a career I was passionate about. I didn't call Evan a liar, I just let the timeline of events speak for itself. The public reaction was swift and decisive. Online, people praised my quiet dignity and grace under pressure. Evan was widely ridiculed, his story was picked apart for its self-serving inconsistencies. He was seen for what he was, a bitter man trying to drag his successful ex-wife down. My phone rang. It was Carol. "How could you," she screamed, not even bothering with a hello. "Air our dirty laundry on national television. You've made this family look like fools." I didn't engage. I didn't raise my voice. I simply listened to her tirade for a moment, and then, I hung up. The power in that simple action was incredible. Later that day, an official email arrived. It was an invitation from the mayor of my hometown. They wanted to present me with a Distinguished Citizen Award at a ceremony in my honor. The irony was almost too perfect. Returning to my hometown for the awards ceremony felt surreal. The same streets I had walked feeling invisible were now familiar and welcoming. My high school English teacher hugged me, her eyes shining with pride. Neighbors who had listened to my mother's gossip for years now greeted me with genuine respect. The event was held at the very community center my old program had helped fund. I saw my parents arrive. My father looked proud, but Carol's smile was a tight, strained mask. I could see her trying to act the part of the proud mother, basking in my reflected glory, but the tension in her shoulders was unmistakable. She moved through her social circle, but the whispers now were about how wrong she had been about her daughter. The narrative had flipped, and she was on the wrong side of it. As I was directed backstage to prepare for my speech, a hand grabbed my arm. It was Carol. She pulled me into a shadowy corner, her face a mask of fury. The confrontation I knew was coming had arrived. "You've turned everyone against me," Carol accused, her voice a low, sharp whisper. "My own friends. They're all laughing at me." I pulled my arm from her grasp. "I didn't turn them against you, Mother. They just finally see me. The person you always tried to hide." Something in her eyes broke then. The anger seemed to drain away, leaving behind a raw, startling honesty. I was scared, okay, she whispered, her voice cracking. I was scared you would outshine him. Your brother was the golden child, the one everyone admired. If you became too successful, what would that say about me? About the way I raised you? The confession hit me harder than any insult ever had. It wasn't about me being unworthy, it was about her own insecurity and favoritism. It was a tragic, broken reason for a lifetime of cruelty. Before I could respond, the ceremony coordinator bustled over. Mary, you're on. They're introducing you now. My name was being called. I had to go. I left my mother standing in the shadows, her mask finally shattered. I stepped onto the stage, the spotlight warm on my face. The audience, filled with hometown faces, erupted into a thunderous, sustained standing ovation. I looked out and saw my father, openly weeping with pride. I saw Carol, still standing at the back, her body rigid, unable to hide the humiliation of being so publicly and undeniably wrong. I began my speech. I spoke about perseverance. I spoke about the importance of community support. I spoke about finding your own voice, even when the people who are supposed to love you try to silence it. I never mentioned my mother or Evan by name, but my story was clear in every word. The applause when I finished was even louder than when I started. I had not just received an award, I had reclaimed my narrative. After the event, as I was accepting more congratulations, Carol approached again. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Mary, she said, her voice uncharacteristically meek. Please. Can we go outside and talk? Alone? We stepped out into the cool night air, away from the crowd. The proud facade she had worn inside completely collapsed. Please, Mary, she begged, her voice trembling. Don't abandon the family. I need your help. She admitted it all. Her social standing was in ruins after my televised interview and subsequent success. Her closest friends were distancing themselves. Worse, she confessed that with my father's pension being less than expected, and with the money she had secretly lent my brother's failing business, their finances were collapsing. She wasn't proud, she was desperate. She was asking me to use my new influence to restore her reputation and solve her money problems. I looked at this woman who had spent my life building me up only to tear me down. I felt a pang of pity, but it was distant, like watching a sad scene in a movie. No, Mother, I said softly. I can't help you with that. I turned to walk back inside, my heart heavy but my resolve firm. Then, I heard rapid, frantic footsteps approaching from the parking lot. I turned to see Evan, his face wild and desperate, storming toward us. Mary! Evan shouted, drawing stares from the few people still lingering outside. You have to fix this. You have to call your lawyer, tell them you lied. I can't get a job anywhere. He was a mess, unshaven, his clothes wrinkled. He tried everything he had left, guilt. We had a life together. Tears. I'm ruined. And finally, threats. I'll never sign the divorce papers. I'll drag this out forever. I stood perfectly still, letting his storm rage around me. When he finally ran out of breath, I spoke, my voice quiet but absolute. I am not your crutch anymore, Evan. Your life is your responsibility to fix. At that moment, 2 security guards from the community center, alerted by the commotion, arrived. I nodded to them. This man is harassing me. They firmly took Evan by the arms and began escorting him, still shouting, back to the parking lot. Carol watched the entire spectacle, her hand over her mouth, horrified by the public humiliation. My phone vibrated with a specific tone I had assigned to my work. It was a message from the White House. The subject line read, Urgent, Town Hall Request. The message was from the President's Chief of Staff. The President was hosting a nationally televised town hall on community revitalization in 2 days. He wanted me there, on stage with him, to discuss my project and take questions. This was the biggest platform of my life. Millions would be watching. My mother, my ex-husband, my brother, they would all see me sitting beside the most powerful person in the world, my expertise and value on full display. I spent the next 36 hours in a whirlwind of preparation, rehearsing talking points, studying briefings. I knew this was my moment to solidify everything I had worked for. I was in my dressing room at the television studio, just minutes from going on air, my heart pounding with a mix of terror and excitement. Then, my personal phone rang. The screen flashed with my mother's name. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick it up. "Mary," Carol's voice was broken, pleading. "Please. Whatever you do up there, don't mention the family. Don't make us look bad on national TV." I listened to her final, desperate plea. There was no apology, no pride. Only a fear for her own reputation. It was the last, confirming piece of evidence I needed. She would never change. "I'm not going to talk about you, Mother," I said into the phone, my voice calm and steady. "I'm going to tell the truth. Not the story you tried to force on me." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then, a soft click as she hung up. I placed my phone on the table, took a deep breath, and smoothed down my suit jacket. A production assistant knocked and opened the door. "Miss Thorne, you're on in 2 minutes." I followed her down the brightly lit hallway, my steps sure and confident. The heavy studio door opened, and I could see the bright lights, the live audience, and the president himself waiting at his podium. He smiled and gestured for me to join him. I walked out onto the stage, into the spotlight, and toward my future. The town hall began. The president introduced me not as a victim, but as a visionary, praising the practical, grassroots impact of my work. When it was my turn to speak, I looked into the camera, imagining Carol and Evan watching from the darkness of their living rooms. I didn't mention them. I spoke about the universal struggle of rising above discouragement. I talked about the courage it takes to believe in yourself when no one else does. I spoke about the quiet strength found in integrity and hard work. My message was one of hope and resilience, and the audience responded with warm, enthusiastic applause. I was no longer Mary, the belittled daughter and wife. I was Mary Thorne, a leader. As the event wrapped up, the president turned to me and said, "For all of America to hear, Mary, this country needs your talent. I'd like to officially offer you the permanent position of Director of Community Revitalization." The audience erupted in applause. The promotion was public, undeniable, and spectacular. A week later, I returned to the house I had shared with Evan to pack the last of my belongings. The place felt like a museum of a life I no longer lived. In the dusty quiet of the home office, I found a sealed envelope on the desk, addressed to me in my father's shaky handwriting. I opened it. It was a long, heartfelt letter. He apologized for his silence over the years. He wrote that he saw my mother's favoritism but felt too weak to confront it, that he was proud of the man my brother had become but was in awe of the woman I had forged myself into. "You are the strongest person I know," he wrote. "Forgive me for not telling you sooner." I sat on the floor amidst the cardboard boxes and cried for the first time in this entire journey. They were not tears of sadness, but of release and a long-awaited validation. As I wiped my eyes, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole. It was Carol. She stood on the doorstep, her shoulders slumped, with one final, predictable request. I opened the door. Carol looked old and tired. "Mary," she began, wringing her hands. "Your new position, people will listen to you. If you could just mention how you had a supportive family. Help me restore my standing. I need your help." I looked at my mother, truly looked at her. The powerful, critical woman of my childhood was gone, replaced by someone frail and trapped by her own choices. There was no anger left in my heart, only a quiet, unshakable certainty. "I don't owe you that, Mother," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "I don't owe you the version of me you tried to destroy." I saw the understanding, and the defeat, dawn in her eyes. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently, a final, soft period at the end of our story. The narrative followed me as I walked to my car, drove to the airport, and flew to Washington. It ended as I stepped into my new, sunlit office, my nameplate on the door, Mary Thorne, Director. A soft smile touched my lips. I had made it. The right way. My triumph wasn't loud or vengeful. It was dignified, achieved, and earned. The people who belittled me were simply left with the echoing consequences of their own choices.